Welcome to today's Explainer. I am so incredibly excited to guide you through this, because we are looking at one of the most massive, ambitious, and just flat-out fascinating human development projects in modern history. We're talking about a project that directly impacts over 1 billion lives, and it's literally going to shape the future of the global economy. Today, we are unpacking the complex journey of India's education system. We'll explore how it evolved from its early foundational policies, how it had to scale up to accommodate a billion-plus population, and how all that history finally culminated in the sweeping, forward-looking national education policy of 2020. There is a ton of incredible data to cover here, and mapping it out really puts the sheer scale of this transformation into perspective.
Okay, let's dive into this. Imagine trying to run the absolute latest smartphone apps on a clunky, beige desktop computer from 1992. It'd be painfully slow, it would crash constantly, and it certainly wouldn't give you the results you need, right? Well, when it comes to human capital and national development, that is exactly the central tension India found itself facing. How do you prepare students for a hyper-connected, technologically advanced, and environmentally fragile 2020s world using an educational blueprint that was drawn up 3 decades ago?
Here's our roadmap for today's explainer. First, the roots of Indian education. Second, massive growth and fundamental rights. Third, the unfinished education agenda. And fourth, enter National Education Policy 2020.
Section 1. The Roots of Indian Education. Laying the Policy Foundation. Let's move to and see how this builds over several decades. The Indian government formulated 3 major structural policies. The first back in 1968, the second in 1986, and the third in 1992. Now, these weren't just random updates or minor tweaks. These were the original blueprints, designed to slowly construct a modern nation's human capital completely from the ground up. The broad objectives of those historical policies were deeply, deeply rooted in nation building. At the time, education was really seen as the primary engine to drive both social justice and economic growth. The goals were straightforward: use education to promote economic development, eradicate massive illiteracy, correct deep social and regional imbalances, and empower women along with disadvantaged groups. These policies recognized early on that to develop a scientific outlook and raise labor efficiency, you absolutely had to systematically invest in human capital.
Section 2. Massive Growth and Fundamental Rights, the Era of Institutional Expansion.
Now, what's really interesting about this number is that it represents a monumental success story. 81%. Thanks to highly targeted adult education programs like Sakshar Bharat, which heavily focused on female literacy in low literacy districts, India saw its adult literacy rate absolutely jump. It went from 61% in 2001 to a staggering 81% by 2020 to 2021. Millions of people, and roughly 3/4 of them women, obtained basic literacy. That's a shift that directly, tangibly improved their quality of life. But the true turning point for access happened in November 2001. A monumental constitutional amendment was passed, literally elevating elementary education to a fundamental right. It explicitly mandated free and compulsory education for children of the age group 6 to 14 years as a fundamental right. This was the ultimate legislative push to achieve the goal of education for all, basically shifting the burden of responsibility straight to the state and parents to ensure every single child was sitting in a classroom. To actually execute this new fundamental right, the government launched these massive, fast-paced flagship programs. You had Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, driving universal elementary education; Kasturba Gandhi Balika Vidyalaya, creating residential schools for marginalized girls. You had PM Poshan, literally the world's largest school feeding program, brilliantly tackling both childhood nutrition and school attendance in one fell swoop. And Beti Bachao Beti Padhao, directly tackling deep-seated gender bias. The sheer scale of institutional expansion during this time was absolutely breathtaking.
Section 3. The Unfinished Education Agenda, the Breaking Point.
And this brilliantly illustrates the exact breaking point of that historical system. On one hand, you had massive access, millions more kids in schools, millions eating daily midday meals. But on the other hand, you had these lingering, incredibly stubborn challenges. Because, as it turns out, mere access did not automatically equal excellence. The system became plagued by alarming dropout rates, highly unequal opportunities, especially when looking across different genders, and most critically, an overall poor quality of education.
You see, building human capital isn't just about putting a student in a chair. It's entirely about the skills they acquire while sitting there. And the system was struggling.
Facilities were inadequate for the booming needs, and severe gender biases still lingered. But honestly, perhaps the most glaring shortcoming was the curriculum itself. The course content was often totally irrelevant to the actual practical needs of the country. There was this massive overemphasis on general formal education, which left a tremendous gap in the technical and vocational skills that a rapidly modernizing workforce desperately needed. And while all this was happening, the world around this struggling system was transforming at light speed. Think about it. The policies of 1992 were built for a pre-digital global landscape based on older social models. But the world today, it demands increased participation from all marginalized groups. It requires a workforce that can adapt to unprecedented technological revolutions. I mean, how could a 1992 framework handle our severe global climate reality? It just couldn't. Society was suddenly facing entirely new environmental, social, and technological realities that the 1992 system was simply never designed to handle. Which brings us to Section 4. Enter National Education Policy 2020, the transformation. So the crucial point is that the NEP 2020 is not just some minor policy update or a little curriculum tweak. It is a comprehensive structural response. It's specifically engineered to tackle both the modern global challenges of the 2020s and all those unfinished agendas left behind by the policies of 68, 86, and 92. It finally acknowledges that to build true human capital today, the very skeleton of the education system needs to evolve. So how exactly does it aim to do this? Primarily through 3 transformative steps. Step 1, completely overhauling the school education system to make it way more holistic and skill-oriented, finally moving away from rote memorization. Step 2, bringing massive structural reforms to higher education, really fostering research, multidisciplinary learning, and those vital technical skills. And step 3, and actually this is perhaps its most vital pillar, it promises to provide this high-quality education with a special, unwavering focus on the marginalized and disadvantaged groups that were historically left behind. It aims to finally bridge that gap between equity and quality. Which leaves us with this final, critical thought. The National Education Policy 2020 has given India a spectacular, visionary blueprint entirely tailored for the 21st century. It clearly knows exactly what needs to be fixed. But policy is only the beginning, right? The true test of human capital formation is going to be in the classrooms, out in the rural schools, and inside the universities. So policy is the blueprint, but will the execution on the ground finally bridge the gap between mere access and true educational excellence? It is a monumental task, and the whole world is going to be watching to see how this ambitious transformation unfolds. Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer today. And as always, keep questioning and keep learning.